In this video tutorial, we're going to dissect the first couple of sentences from The Old Man and the Sea so you can get an idea of how to approach the dissection exercises. So notice up at the top, I have instructed you to use the brackets for clauses and the parentheses for phrases. So that's how we're going to do this. So let's go ahead and start. When you approach sentences, you want to look for the verb first, or any verbs in the sentence first, because that's going to orient you to where everything else is in the sentence. So our first verb we find in the first sentence is was. So let's mark that with a V. And to the left of the verb is always our subject, unless it's one of our three exceptions, a here, there sentence, or sometimes in a question, or if it's a command and there's the inferred you. But in this situation, it's just the traditional subject verb. So we're going to mark both of those, and that makes this an independent clause because there's no subordinator before the subject. So let's put that in brackets and mark that IC. And I'm going to put the bracket at the end of that clause, and that's our IC. Look for the next verb in the sentence, who fished alone in a skiff. So fished is our next verb. So let's identify that. To the left of that is our subject, but notice here we have who. It's a subordinator and a subject. Who, that, which are our three magic subordinators that can act also as a subject. So we want to underline it since it's a subordinator, and then we also want to identify it as the subject, and then mark that as our DC. Putting a bracket there, identifying it as a DC, put the bracket at the end of that DC. And I don't see any more verbs until we get to had gone. So we got to identify that verb. And then we know that there must be a subject to the left of it. So had gone, he is our subject. Then we look before that to see if there's a subordinator. And we have the word and. And is not a subordinator. It's one of our fanboy conjunctions. So we're just going to leave that out of the equation and put a bracket here and identify this as another IC, since there's no subordinator before it. And I don't see any more verbs in this sentence, so let's put a bracket around the end of that for the end of that IC. And now let's go back and see if we can find any prepositional phrases. So let's see. He was an old man who fished alone in. Here's our first prepositional phrase. So we're going to put parentheses around prepositional phrases and identify that as a prepositional phrase. Preposition plus the noun. Then we have right away another prepositional phrase, in a skiff. So let's put that in parentheses and identify that. Then we have our fanboys, 84 days now without. Here's our next preposition, plus the noun, so that's our prepositional phrase, without taking a fish. And now we've dissected that whole sentence, so it's a IC, DC, followed by prepositional phrases, connected with a coordinating conjunction. We find another IC, a PP, and that's the end. Okay, let's do the next one together. This is a short one, so we're looking for the verb first. Here we go, had been, so let's identify that as a verb. To the left of that, we have the subject, a boy. So we're going to identify that. And before that, we have in the first 40 days a prepositional phrase. So let's go ahead and identify that right now. In the first 40 days. No subordinator or anything, so we know that that's an IC. So let's put the bracket there and identify this IC and put the bracket around it. So we have prepositional phrase and then an IC. That one was pretty easy. Let's keep going. Here we have our sentence starting with a fanboys, a coordinating conjunction. So we're just going to leave that out. And then our next word here after prepositional phrase. So let's identify that. I like to look for the verb first, but since this is starting with a prepositional phrase, we're just going to get that out of the way. After 40 days, preposition plus a noun. Another prepositional phrase. So we're going to identify that. Without a fish, the preposition plus the noun. Now let's see if we can find any verbs. The boy's parents had told. There we go. So had told is our verb. To the left of that, the boy's parents is our subject. And that starts our IC because there's no subordinator there. So we're going to identify the IC. The boy's parents had told him. Any more verbs told him that the old man was. Here we go. Let's look for that verb. And to the left of the verb, the old man is a subject. And before that, we have our subordinator. So let's underline the subordinator and mark that as our DC and put brackets around it. That the old man was now definitely and finally salaho. These are just adverbs, so we'll just put that in part of the DC. It's looking for the next verb. We have is. So don't forget that is and was are verbs. A lot of times students look over those because they're such small words. Is, and to the left of the is our subject subordinator, one of our magic subordinators that can act as a subject and a subordinator. So we're going to underline it to identify it as a subordinator, and then we're going to also identify it as a subject, which is, and then let's mark it as a DC. The worst form of unlucky. Going to the end there of the DC. Let's keep going and looking for another verb. The boy had gone. So we have had gone as our verb. Let's identify that. And to the left of that is our subject, the boy. And any subordinators before that? Nope, just another coordinating conjunction. Our fanboys, so we're going to leave that out and mark this as an IC. The boy had gone at their orders in another boat, which caught 3 good fish. We have another verb, so let's identify the verb. And to the left of that is our subject subordinator. Oops. We're going to underline that and mark it as a subject also because it's one of our magic subordinators. That can be a subject and a subordinator. Caught 3 good fish the first week. I don't see any other verbs, so let's go back and see if we can find prepositional phrases. Here's our first one, in another boat. So let's identify that by putting parentheses around the prepositional phrase, in another boat. At their orders, another prepositional phrase, the preposition plus the noun. at their orders. Here we have of unlucky. So now we're going to identify that as a preposition, putting parentheses around it, of unlucky. And there we go. Did we miss any? I think that pretty much covers it. So let's take a look at this. We start the sentence with a coordinating conjunction, which you're not supposed to do technically, but when you break that rule, you notice it adds a lot of emphasis to the sentence. Starts with a prepositional phrase, after 40 days. Continues with another prepositional phrase, without a fish. Then we have the IC, the boy's parents had told him. Then we have a DC, that the old man was now definitely and finally Salaho. Then we have another DC, which is the worst form, followed by a couple prepositional phrases, of unlucky. Then we have another coordinating conjunction, linking it to an IC, the boy had gone, with a prepositional phrase, at their order, another prepositional phrase, in another boat, and then the DC, which is caught. So we forgot to mark that DC. Let's put that in now. Put brackets around it. Which caught 3 good fish the first week. This is an interesting one because if you see the first week, he's really saying in the first week. So sometimes you're going to find that you have to insert words to figure out what a phrase is or a clause is. So let's make that a prepositional phrase and call that in the first week a prepositional phrase. So that's how we're going to continue to dissect sentences. As we move on and learn more grammar, we'll be even adding more to these sentences. But for now, for the old man in the sea, you're going to pick your own 5 sentences from a land scene and 5 sentences from a sea scene and dissect them in this way.